What's up everybody, it's Drew Wilkins with Swine Bovine Barbecue, and in this video we're making some direct heat brisket. Let's get going. Let's trim this bad boy up. Had this in the freezer for an hour prior to trimming. Probably was about 20 minutes too long because some of this is, especially this decal fat's frozen solid. But what I like to start with first when trimming a brisket is removing the decal fat. So just get our knife in here. It's kind of a natural seam this follows. We'll just take this decal fat out. You could just shave this down like it looks right here, but you'll have to cut that off before serving the brisket. So everything that I want to have once it comes off the cooker, I want it to be sliceable. So when you go to a restaurant and they cut a brisket in half, then they're on the fatty end with the point, and they make a little kind of angled cut, flick something off to the side, that's because they shave this instead of pulling it out, which is a fine way to do it, but I don't have the accuracy that they do, and I just want to get it all out in the trim process. So I'm going to knife the rest of this out. So we'll clean up this backside a little. It's the second thing I do. I don't go too heavy on the backside. I found that there's not a huge need for it, but we'll make it look somewhat decent. Some of these bigger pieces of fat. And this is a great looking prime brisket. Picked it up from Costco. You can see the marbling throughout the flat here. That's incredible. So if this doesn't turn out good, it's on me, not the quality of meat. It's one of the better prime looking briskets I've ever got from Costco. So while we've got this flipped over, we're going to take this little edge off right here. Round it off a bit. Flip it over and start on the top. First thing on the top is we'll get rid of the mohawk. That's this piece of flat meat that sticks up right here. Obviously a lot thinner than the rest of the brisket, and it's going to burn up. So I'm just going to trim this down. And I like to come over here and just kind of round out this side right here. You can do it later, but I like to do it earlier in the cut. It helps us see how much fat we have. Then just take the fat cap down to about 1/4 inch. Maybe go a little more than 1/4 inch on this one. I might try and leave, it's always a little bit of a guessing game for me on whether or not I leave 1/4 inch, but probably try and leave a little more on this one since we're going direct heat, and that's a little different than an offset. There we have it. Our brisket is nicely trimmed. No sharp edges. Probably could have left some sharp edges on this one if you wanted to, because we're cooking it direct heat. It's not going to have the airflow that an offset would, but I trimmed it just like I would normally on an offset because that's how I like to trim briskets. Let's get this seasoned. To start things off, we've got a 50-50 mix of coarse black pepper and kosher salt, Diamond Crystal kosher salt. So I'm just going to go with a nice even coating. And then I'm going to come over the top with a 50-50 mix of granulated garlic and granulated onion. Flip it over and repeat. Our brisket, along with half the countertop, is nicely seasoned. So we're going to clean this up, but let's go fire up the pit. Our Chudbox is cruising along right around 250, 275, which is where I want it for this cook. So let's put our brisket on. And this feels very foreign, but we are going fat cap down. Go at a little bit of an angle, that way it fits perfectly. You could certainly go sideways, but that's how we're gonna start out for now. I usually go between 300 to 350 when cooking direct heat barbecue. However, this is going to be a long cook, and I'm going to go lower on this brisket. I'd love for it to stay around 275 the whole time. We'll see how well I do at that. You can easily overcook the outside of this brisket, and it gets that almost leathery, jerky type texture on the outside, and we want to slice this and serve it like a normal brisket. We don't want to turn it into chopped beef. So that's why I'm going to go a little lower than I typically do when cooking direct heat. But for now, I'm going to touch up a little of these areas with some seasoning where it got rubbed off from my hands. But after that, we're going to shut it down, let it cook. 2.5 hours into this cook, and we're gonna flip our brisket. Already has fantastic color on what would normally be the bottom side, but just we'll call it the non-fat cap side. Let's see how the fat cap side's looking. Looks unreal. Looks really, really good. So I think this is gonna take a lot longer than 5 hours to cook, but I was worried about leaving it on one side for too long. Again, we're trying to avoid that leathery, jerky-ish texture that can happen with brisket that's overcooked. Just for reference, 2.5 hours in, that's probably about the thickest point of the flat. We're at 168 degrees. So, gonna let this go, continue to cook. I don't know if I'm gonna wrap it or yet not. It's kind of gonna be a game time decision. For now, we're just gonna shut it down, let it cook. To start off our mop sauce, we're gonna go in with a good helping of beef tallow. Tallow is nice and melted, so we're gonna go in with half a sliced onion. Onion is cooked down a bit, so now we're gonna go in with a handful of crushed garlic cloves. Our garlic is nice and fragrant, so now we're gonna go in with a decent amount of apple cider vinegar. Then also a decent amount of Worcestershire, some hot sauce, some mustard powder, crushed red pepper, and a little bit of salt. Stir that up, and our mop sauce is done. All right, let's mop our brisket. I originally wasn't planning on mopping the brisket, but I think it'll help out some of the harder spots, help keep them a little softer. That way when we slice, we'll have that nice texture. So not doing this a ton for flavor, although it will obviously have flavor. Tip it off because we don't want pooling right there. We'll mop this maybe every 30 minutes. Not gonna do it very often, and might just focus on areas that might feel tough, but as a whole, the brisket's feeling pretty good right now. I'm happy with it so far. Let's hope it remains that way. Roughly 2 hours after we first flipped our brisket, and a couple of mops later, we're gonna flip it back over to where the fat cap is closest to the fire. So gonna mop it real quick. Make sure we take off anything that's too hard or crunchy. Just again, soften it up so we avoid that leathery, jerky, I'm already tired of saying it, so you're probably tired of hearing it, texture. And just for reference right now, at 190. Still tight, so we've got some cooking to go. Just gonna flip this over. Looks good. Love that dark mahogany style color. Let's mop this backside. Shut it down, same thing. Mop every 30 minutes or so until this is done. All right, a little over an hour after we flipped it back fat cap down, we're still not quite tender enough yet. So I'm gonna flip this over. We've hit the mop a couple of times on it, more so on the sides. That's the areas that tend to get crispy. And we're still feeling pretty good. Right there up top, it's feeling a little tough, which that's the area we're gonna be cutting the point from. So that's not fantastic, not the end of the world. But we'll just hit it with a little mop again, and then we're gonna let it finish cooking on this side. You can see we're getting pretty close. I mean, there's jiggle. We're still a little tight in the flat. So we're gonna give this a quick mop, and we're gonna let it go till it's tender. 6 hours and 20 minutes later, and our brisket is done. Looks and smells fantastic. And I'm breaking out the butcher paper. I think it's probably the first time I've used it on this channel. I think most of you know that I love the foil boat that was popularized by Leroy and Lewis and Brad over at Chud's Barbecue. But since we're kind of feeling pretty crunchy on some of these edges over here, kind of all around, I'm gonna wrap it in paper to rest. This is fully cooked. I mean, you can see that jiggle. It is nice and tender. Right here, we're still a little tight, but I'm thinking the carryover will take care of it. But just for reference, and kind of the thickest part of the flat there, about 207 in the thickest part of the flat. So that's what it took to get there. But we're gonna hit this with some mop sauce, help make this paper nice and pliable as well. Get some down on the bottom side here, kind of all over the paper. To do so, fold over like this. Tuck this in tight. Pull it nice and tight. Fold this over. There, got a nice little brisket package. Definitely feels a little weird wrapping a brisket after you get done cooking it. I've never cooked an unwrapped brisket before. This is the first time. Granted, it's a little bit of a different cook since we're doing it on the direct heat cooker, but I'm really excited for these results. So this is just gonna hang out room temperature inside until it comes down to about 140 degrees. And if we're ready to eat at that point in time, we'll just go ahead and slice it. If not, it'll go into the oven. Lowest my oven goes is 145 degrees. So it'll go in at 145 degrees until we're ready to eat. But this is gonna go inside and rest. Our brisket has had a nice rest. So let's unwrap this present, see how it's looking. Looking good, definitely tender, and it's got a completely different smell from any brisket I've ever had. It smells amazing. A little bit of that mop sauce. I wasn't trying to impart just a ton of flavor to it, but just kind of a great grilled smell. I cannot wait to dig into this. Let's cut into this bad boy. Got a little hard stuff over here, so we'll probably get some shredding on this end. A little tight right here, but we're gonna cut this way to go against the grain. On the flat, but then on the point, we're gonna run into that several times. We've waited long enough. Let's cut into this bad boy. Well, not a squeezer of brisket, but you can definitely see the moisture that's coming out of the seam fat. The seam fat is nicely rendered. We've got a little bit of a smoke ring, which makes absolutely no sense because I put nothing but charcoal in there, but hey, I don't hate it. It adds to the characteristics or appeal of it, but that looks really good. I am loving the way that looks so far. Let's take a few ends of this. Definitely dry at the tip of the flat. Let's cut a few more slices, see how we're doing. Yeah, looking kind of dry. Not ideal, but we'll see what it tastes like. This was the area that was not quite fully tender when I decided to wrap it. Needed a little bit to go, but not fully been test worthy, but didn't feel too bad at all. So let's see how this point's looking. So we'll cut off our end here. That's looking good. We've got some nice render throughout the point. Love to see it. So let's do a couple of slices here. We're not shredding. Of course, we're not at this big part yet, but so far, so good. Yeah, lots of juice. Pretty solid looking slice there. I've got no complaints with that. Let's see how it tastes. The work is done and it is time to eat. Last two brisket cooks I've done on this channel has been a cook and eat on the same day, and I don't hate it. You don't have to wait an overnight rest in order to eat, but we saw from the way it looks cutting it, looks really, really good. See how it tastes. Cheers. Starting off with a little burn-in piece. It's really, really good. I'm trying to figure out how to describe it. It's almost got like a grill flavor, which makes sense. We cooked it directly over charcoal, and direct heat barbecue is not grilling, but it has a great flavor. I need to eat another piece to see how it is. Yeah, it's a unique flavor, unlike one I have not had before. The fat's a little different too. It's definitely tender and rendered. I mean, you can see the fat render based on the slices, but it almost has more of a, I don't know, gelatinous feel. It's not as melt in your mouth as a traditional smoked brisket. Maybe that's due to the fact that it did not spend the same amount of time under heat that smoked brisket would. I mean, it normally takes me anywhere between 12 to 14 hours to cook a brisket on my offset. And we were, what, at 6 hours and 20 minutes, I think? So maybe that has something to do with it. Maybe it's just a specific cut. I'm not sure. Let's go ahead and we'll cut off a little bit of this fatty here from the point and give it a shot. Really good. It's got a different taste to it than a smoked brisket. Well, obviously it didn't spend 14 hours in smoke, but it's really, really good and really unique. Again, it's kind of hard to describe it. I do miss the smoke flavor a little bit that you get from a traditional brisket, but it's got that different taste from the fat dripping down on the coals. I don't get a ton of the mop sauce, which is not a bad thing. I didn't want it to be a heavy flavor component like it is when I do ribs, but it's just got kind of a nice, I don't want to say, maybe a little bit of a cleaner flavor profile than a smoked brisket, if that makes any sense whatsoever, because you don't have the smoke. It's, you know, it's lit coals, or if they're not lit when I throw them on there, they catch pretty fast because it's resting on top of charcoal that's fully lit. So it doesn't really have a chance to get any of the different flavors you would get outside of the fat dripping down on the coals, which you definitely get with this. It's good. Let's try the flat. Cut off a little piece here. Give this a go. Yeah, that's good. This fat on top of this, at least specific piece of the flat, is perfectly rendered. It's probably going to be almost impossible to see, especially with the angle that the sun is at right now, for me to hold it up and you to see it, but it's perfectly rendered. Really, really good. So we're going to cut this off. Anybody that's watched a brisket video of mine before knows my favorite way to eat a slice of brisket. We're getting a little shredding right here. There's a little tough piece on this side, and it's harder to cut through. Serrated knife certainly helps, but it can only do so much. So that's the first casualty of a little too much done, that leathery / jerky thing that we definitely wanted to avoid. But we cut a decent amount earlier and didn't have any of it. But my favorite way to eat is this in-between slice right here, so you get a little bit of the point up top, a lot of the flat in it, and then put some onions on it. Make a nice fold over. Love this. That's ridiculously good. I love onion, and eat some Martin's potato bread with it, and a brisket that's cooked good. It's hard to beat that in my opinion. So that's a direct heat brisket. Incredibly good. I would definitely make this again. I think I prefer it done on an offset though. It's lacking that smoke flavor. Now, it certainly does take on a different flavor profile from the fat dripping on the coals. A little bit of that mop sauce, but not a ton, which again was the goal. And you know, we do have some tougher sides over here that slicing the rest of this brisket is probably going to be a little tougher, just due to the fact of it's hard to not crisp up your edges when cooking direct heat like this. And that's normally a good thing, but when you want a sliceable piece of brisket, it makes it a little tougher. If you're not so worried about presentation and it's not an issue, then don't worry about it. Yeah, this is definitely a success. Cooking a brisket in the same day you're eating it is always a lot of fun, but I highly recommend giving this a shot. If you got a direct heat cooker, you won't be disappointed. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more videos like this, please hit that subscribe button. And if you have any comments, suggestions on what I could have done differently on this cook, or what you want to see me cook next, please leave it in the comments below. But as always, thanks for watching. We'll catch you in the next one. Bye.